could say that briefly, besides the Piper Cub, which most people thought every plane was, in this picture is also a Taylorcraft and a Larcom and a Stinson and a few other things besides in the background.
Piper Cubs are my forte, Rich. I'll call them all Piper Cubs.
Yeah.
Seeing that tower reminds me, when we were kids, I don't know about you, Paul, but we all had dares to climb that tower.
Yep, right.
And that was a hand-over-hand, outside wrong affair. I don't know how tall it was, but it certainly seemed very tall once you got up on top of it. And many times we went up on that thing and then shinnied back down again. Needless to say, our parents never knew about that.
Well, between that and climbing the 128 overpass construction, you had quite a time.
We had an exciting time.
Exciting time, yes, right.
By the way, we never did find out, Paul, where did you grow up as a youngster? What part of Beverly did you grow up in?
In the Rouside section. In fact, I'm still living in my own homestead.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to get into the next series of pictures that really are the most exciting ones, at least for me, because we now are into the aerial photographs here that we're taking. Wonderful snapshots.
Sure.
And so we'll...
In fact, the next two aerials are this same meet, which is pictured on the this overall shot on the ground.
Okay.
It just so happens it's the same meet based on the aircraft, the same aircraft in the same positions.
Okay.
So the next two photographs are actually of the same meet, taken from various angles. One probably taken from the northwest, looking over the field, and another more distant shot taken from the west, over Danvers, looking back toward the field.
Okay.
The circle that appears in the center of a lot of these photographs.
Glad you brought that up, Rich.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Ted, but I certainly have no idea what that circle was. Was it a defining point for pilots coming in? Was it a place for people to parachute into if there was that sort of thing? What was that circle?
Well,
does anyone know?
I should have mentioned earlier, but it was used for calibrating the compasses on the aircraft. It would sit in the center of the circle and line itself up with various marks along the periphery of the circle.
Fascinating.
And also, it appeared to be at the intersection of the east-west and north-south runways, also of the airport. It was sort of a
somewhat dead center type thing.
It's sort of a marker for, you know, to land toward. The next photograph is looking from the east, an aerial shot showing the Beverly Aero Club hangar with a few aircraft around it. And again, it shows the circle we just mentioned on the upper right portion of the picture.
Okay, now we're in the late 30s here, are we not, Paul, basically? 1940.
Yeah, this would be about the fall of 1940.
And it's still very country-ish up there, very, very rural looking in appearance up there. Not that it isn't today, but you know, with the various developments that are close by today, you don't get this kind of a scene anymore as you look overhead from the sky.
This field was sort of out in the middle of nowhere, more or less, and it was quite rural, as I remember when we first used to go there.
Lovely pictures, though. I'm just fascinated by these photos from the sky.
Now, we again see a photograph looking from the southwest direction of the airport, taken in November of 1940.
These are the former fields, an area land owned by Mr. Hood
and the Swifts.
And the Swift family. By this time, had Beverly Airport acquired all of the land to which it would eventually have, or was there still more acquisitions to come?
This land is more or less the same acreage that we
as we see it today.
This is the same acreage that appeared back in the 1930 era. They didn't really add that much more to it during that 10-year period. The appearance of the field didn't change too much in the 30s. It really changed when they decided to build the first paved runway, which was built by the Federal FAA, Federal Aeronautics Administration, with the WPA as the builder of it.
Good work project then for many people who were in need of jobs back in that time.
Back during the
Yep.
Depression era.
Yep. Now what do we have here now, Paul? Item 30.
Now this is a good winter shot of the Beverly Airport, taken just about over the Hood's Cherry Hill Farm, looking down at the field. You can see the tracks that the planes had made.
I was going to say, those are plane tracks that
yes,
landing and taking off.
landing and taking off and taxiing.
Yeah. Now, Rich, that must have been a real adventure to land and take off in one of these little planes in the snow.
I would certainly imagine so.
They all had to have skis, of course, if they were to operate in the winter.
Yeah.
Not to mention how cold it was in those things.
Yeah, open. Well, are we now
even-
beyond the open cockpit period of time, Paul, or were these planes now insulated?
There were some of the biplane open cockpit, but most of them were the cabin type
I see.
of Pipers
Yeah.
or Taylorcraft type or Stinson.
Yep.
But even those, I recall my brother-in-law having a Piper J3 back in the 1960s and early 70s, and we took a flight in the winter over Edaville Railroad.
Uh-huh.
And those things have nothing but isinglass windows zippered in.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, it was cold in that thing, and we were only up in it 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And that's one of the real classics where you got out and spun the propeller by hand.
Yeah.
In fact, we were sitting in it while he spun the propeller. He wasn't even in it. He says, when it catches, move this switch up. At that point, I was ready to get out.
Yeah, that was it. Now, who would be flying in the dead of winter out of Beverly Airport? As I ponder that, I mean, you know, most folks at that period of time, in the late 30s and 40s, were more or less trade oriented, weren't they? I mean, or bus or whatever, but were there actually people that were on business trips and things that were flying out at this point in time?
That did occur, but I would say most of the flights were done by the Aero Club, just as a
Sport.
as a sport, sure. And I guess the members held a steady job besides. This was just a hobby of theirs.
Sure.
And but there were some commercial flights
Okay.
made in and out of there.
Was the mail still going in and out at this time?
Yes, that
So
still
that's-
occurred.
There's certainly
Yeah.
one reason. Sure.
Okay, let's move right along here. More aerial views here.
Now, Beverly acquired the title of the land at the airport finally in 1941. So they own the airport now at this point, and they decided to have the first paved runway built, which they started constructing in February of '41. And here in this photograph you can see the start of the bulldozing and leveling of the old grass field to make way for the new runway. We're looking now probably from the north direction, looking south.
So it was the north-south runway that was the first paved.
Yes, actually the first paved, I would say, was a northeast, northwest-southeast
I see.
direction.
Yeah. Don't say that we could say a little bit of Wenham Lake here too in this picture.
In the background,
In the background, upper
yes.
left-hand corner, a
Yeah,
little bit of Wenham Lake there.
and I think you can see part of Cherry Hill Farm way over on the upper right.
Yeah. You know, Rich, they must have had a sense, though, of the impending troubles that were going to be occurring both
You'd
sides
almost
of the
think so.
continent. And they, you know, somehow I get the feeling that they were intuitively, or whenever they were sprucing this place up, anticipating what what might be going to happen. You
That's
know.
what I was thinking when he was mentioning the date.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like they knew.
Yep.
Well, it was what they call the Defense Landing Areas program, which really was taking place there. There were other fields around the country built under the same program. All that needed to be done was to have the field owned by whoever, and then the government would construct the runway.
Subsidize the cost
yes,
of the program.
And this was, I guess, the result of the winds of war, as you said.
Yep.
And it was to occur less than a year later, the
It happened.
bombing of Pearl Harbor that same year, in fact.
It happened,
That the
right.
runway
Right.
was constructed.
Okay, we'll move right along now, Paul, because we're
Right,
got a few
Yeah.
few to go here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The next one shows a good shot looking from the west of the first runway nearing completion. It's what's known as runway 3416 at the airport now. It's about 4,600 feet long by 150 feet wide.
The notes here say that the Beverly Aero Club hangar, which had to be moved back to make way for this runway, and the new North
yes.
Shore Airways hangar
Yes.
would be showed here.
Yeah, as I said earlier, North Shore, after it formed, they bought land adjacent to the field and built this hangar, and later in the fall of the same year, they built a second hangar along with a operations building.
Things are beginning to get big time up here now.
It's getting more like what we're used to seeing today.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay, let's go on to the next one,
right.
Paul. A nice ground shot here of the North Shore Airways hangar.
Yeah, well, this is a closer shot of the same hangar which we saw from the air in the previous picture, showing the operations building as it looked when it was first constructed. And nowadays it looks a bit different. It's been enlarged quite extensively and with a tower behind it.
Well, Quonset huts were very popular back in those days, though the style of the Quonset hut
The
was a
rounded
popular
roofs,
way of constructing buildings and houses too, homes for the returning veterans after the war. Remember those, Rich? The Quonset huts?
Yes.
There was, I remember the ones on Essex Street in Beverly, down where I believe the elderly housing development is
That's
at this
right.
point.
They were quick to put up and, you know, relatively inexpensive form of building for almost any reason. A lot of construction companies had them for their big construction equipment.
Up on Edon Street, they're just right about where the Haiku
That's right.
restaurant is today. There was a
Very,
section of them also.
very little known, really, that there was that many of them around Beverly.
And I recall another group of them down where the old First National
That's right,
used to be.
by the Balch Playground.
Yes, by the Bulge, yes.
Hey, well, we're older than we ought to be here talking about these things.
We're dating ourselves,
I won't
yes.
tell if you won't.
Okay. Anything else about this one, Paul, before we move right along here?
Well, a couple of the aircraft in the picture is a Fairchild 24 over on the right side, and a Piper nosing. It's with the nose protruding from the inside of the hangar.
I'm glad you said Piper, by the way. That makes me
It
feel
really
good.
was a Piper at that
Okay.
time, yes.
All right. We get some festivities here.
Now, after the airport's first runway was completed, it was reason for a festivities in the form of a rededication. The original dedication, as I said in a previous program, occurred back in June of 1928, with Mayor Patch given the dedication. Now, Mayor Patch was the chairman of the committee to set up this rededication this time. Now, this shows the mass colors being performed at the start of the air display, air show.
Photograph dated August 10, 1941.
That was the date of the rededication show, which I attended with my parents, I recall. Yeah.
Well, I won't ask Rich about that, though, because you probably were...
I was a month old, not quite.
Not quite in shape to travel
Mm-hmm.
at that point. Okay, who do we have here, Paul?
Well, Congressman George Bates from Salem gave the main address at the air show. And the left background shows Roy Patch, who was the chairman of the air show committee.
That was a nice gesture to invite him back as to head this committee. Of course, he was the mayor back in '28, and now we're 13 years later, and he's retired, of course, from politics at this point in time. To have him come back like that, nice gesture. Mr. Patch lived, by the way, up until recent times. I understand he lived to be quite advanced in years.
Up around 90, wasn't he, almost, when he died?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, from Congressman Bates, we now go local to WESX, I believe, here.
Yes. On the left is Tom Carr from ESX interviewing Roy Patch, and in the center is Frank Dennis from the WESX station.